We are going to have a good time today, continuing the conversation that we started a couple of weeks ago.
Gabe, I'm pretty excited. It's been a couple weeks since we've talked about AI. It's been one episode since we've talked about AI, and we already have to go back to the AI conversation. So today we're talking all about Apple Intelligence.
I love how you just keep throwing those in there.
We just
random shade at Apple Intelligence.
You know, like 20 people just like heard that and just bounced. They just left the podcast. No, I'm kidding. We're talking about Copilot. Okay, now we just lost the other 20 people. But Gabe, I'm always excited to talk AI with you. And I think it's one of those things that every day there's something new with AI in the news. Half the time it's Anthropic doing something new, which, by the way, did you see their new integration today?
Is it the one where you can where you can use Opus, but use it as like a collaborator and I forget exactly the term that used it.
That was yesterday's
yesterday. Oh my gosh.
Today's announcement. So they have Claude or Sonnet in or whatever they call it in PowerPoint and Excel, right?
Yes.
Well, now you can have it directly integrated with Microsoft Word. And the funniest thing to me is using Claude and Excel on some personal projects. It's so much better than Copilot in Excel, which you would think is a problem. And I hope someone from Microsoft is listening. I love the Microsoft Enterprise apps, but something just didn't happen correctly with Copilot.
It's wild to me. You and I have had this conversation before, probably not on the podcast, but it's so crazy to me that the Microsoft Office applications work so much better with Claude integration than they do with Copilot. It makes zero sense, and I don't understand it. But for whatever reason, it does. And that's cool. I didn't realize that they'd rolled it out to Word as well. I did see something hilarious about Word, that it's somehow survived. Like, I feel like it's like a cockroach or something. Like, it will never die. It just manages to continue to survive forever and ever and ever. It's that thing's a workhorse, man.
Can I make one hot take before we talk about Meta?
Please.
Google Docs, I will say, is an acceptable replacement for Microsoft Word. Now, that's where that conversation stops, though. But in college, if we ever collaborated on documents, heck, we went straight to Google Docs. But that's about it for Google.
Yeah, definitely not Sheets replacement for Excel, but that's fine. Yeah, we did want to talk. One of the other news items out this week, Zach, was the new Meta AI model, which I believe is called Muse Spark, which is kind of a stupid name, but that's fine. But I know you've used this a little bit, and we were kind of talking about we were talking about the trust that you have, or lack thereof, of Meta/Facebook, and what you would share with their AI model. And I thought that was an interesting topic that we should talk about for just a moment here.
Yeah, it's interesting. So I did some testing, and right now I built like websites. I animated that photo, which I have to say that photo animation was really good. It was
that
super
actually
good.
was really good.
I have no idea when I would ever use that in life, but like, it's a thing, I guess. It's AI slop. But the website was pretty good. It followed like the modern elements you would see within a website. It did some photo generation, which, I mean, I've yet to be super impressed by AI generated photos. Gemini's largely got that space locked down. I wouldn't say I'm impressed, but it's the best I've seen so far.
Well, it was certainly way better than that unhinged picture that was on the website you sent me. The one, just to give everybody an idea of what Zach sent, it was a mocked up broadband service provider website. It looked quite good, and I was pretty impressed with it. But the hero image was hilarious because it looked like half an office and half a home, and somehow it combined these two things together, where there was this big conference room on the left-hand side and then a couch with a TV and like a fridge on the other. It was hilarious.
Did you notice there was no TV? It was just an empty wall.
Really? Oh, I totally missed
go
that.
Go back and check it out. Also, the kitchen was missing some appliances, but the photo was bad. But long story long here, I think the big thing here is Meta just spent billions in a year to bring in the talent to build the infrastructure for this AI overhaul. This new model um, is I think it gave keep me honest here, but it's their first kind of non-open source model. So they
Hmm.
shifted from this open source, AI to this proprietary model. So there's, business implications there. But the big question now, Gabe, and I want to know your thoughts on this too, but can it make money? Do you think Meta can make money on their new AI tool,
I'm sure they will figure out a way to make money on this, as Meta always does, printing cash.
especially with
But
the metaverse?
yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean, look, they've obviously had some swings and misses too, but that's any company when you're,
That's innovation.
operating at that scale. Yeah, exactly. It's going to be interesting to see how they monetize this for sure. It is interesting to see them shift this from the llama models that came out initially to that were all open source to now doing this more, bespoke or closed source or whatever we want to call it, these models. I the big difference, I think, with companies like OpenAI or Anthropic and Meta is we have a lot of history with Meta, and that's not necessarily good history of how they've used personal data to figure out ways to make money in probably not super ethical ways. And I thought it was just very interesting of the juxtaposition, and this is probably just because of the newness, but the personal information that people will share with companies like OpenAI or Anthropic versus what you would think about sharing with a company like Meta. It's a Those are two completely opposite ends of the spectrum.
I mean, I hesitate to upload a picture to Meta's AI, like the one I animated yesterday. I was hesitant, but I I agree with you, Gabe. I think people have this bad, or I shouldn't say people. I think Meta has this bad reputation for how they've handled data in the past, which is odd
Hmm.
because I mean, there's photos of my friends all the way back to middle school on this platform, Um, but like I said, the conversations we've seen people having with Chat GPT, Claude, so on and so on, it's interesting, and I still I'm not convinced. I'm not convinced Meta AI will be a consumer friendly product. I'm told it's integrated into the sunglasses, so I haven't tried that yet. I'll have to do that. But I'm skeptical. But again, they've just invested tens of billions of dollars
Hmm.
in resources into this platform. So where it goes and how companies leverage this is going to be interesting. I don't think it's bad, but like I said, I struggled to like I tested it out and then I went straight back to Claude. How are we going to get past that?
Hmm. Yep. Yeah. There's got to be some massive differentiation from what you're getting with other solutions right now to justify moving there versus building in someplace else, which is a lovely transition, Zach, to what we wanted to talk about today. And it is tying a bit back to the last episode that we had, which was consuming or using AI versus building with AI. And we had this conversation on the last episode where we talked a lot about how those two things are very different. What we wanted to do today was basically take that a step further and share some details about projects that Zach and I have been working on over the last couple of weeks, and really specifically, focused on the broadband service provider space that we think are really interesting and that allowed us to take it from, hey, I have an idea to let's go build a working tool. And as we talked about on that episode a couple of weeks ago, the time frame between those two things has been compressed so far, man. It's wild to me how
What time
quickly we
frame?
can go. Yeah, exactly. How we can go from idea to concept so rapidly. So I'm excited to get in this and talk about some of these examples today.
And one of the big frustrations I have, Gabe, is there's a lot of AI slop. There was news recently about Apple banning some AI creation tools from their app store, which I've tested. I was never impressed by any of them. I don't blame Apple for removing them. But we're also in this, challenging era of, we all have access to the technology to build this, but what are we actually going to build? How do we know what to build? And Gabe, we've been using some pretty fantastic tools. I'm so happy I've got you introduced to Claude. That might be like my personal achievement of the year is getting Gabe Peterson to use Claude from Anthropic. Not that I'm surprised you are, but like seeing what you've built, and we'll talk about this throughout the podcast today. You've got the tools, you have the expertise to know and have that idea of what you want to build or solve a problem, and you've kind of filled in that gap, Gabe. So I'm proud of you.
I mean, I'm not gonna lie, Zach. I'm pretty proud of myself too, to be perfectly honest with you. It's been so fun. And it just feels like it's been such a cool unlock for me to be more efficient with the activities that I'm doing. This isn't even one of the projects that we were going to talk about today, but just to talk about one that I happened to do this week, I had somebody approach me and say, "Hey, do we have any KPIs and benchmarks for like our industry writ large and how that aligns to the Calix value prop?" And I was like, "Actually, we really don't." But did some AI work, and within a couple hours, I had a document that I, felt was frankly really excellent. And there was a little bit of cleanup I had to do. I had to go through and provide some of my own context and tweak some things. But what would have taken me probably a week before, I was done within 2 to 3 hours and had something that frankly was really, really good to share internally with folks to help them understand the industry.
I love that so much. It's gone from no, let me find it to just say yes, Gabe. You can build whatever you want now.
Yeah, exactly. Well, the first topic we wanted to get into today, Zach, is it's one that we talked about. I went back and looked at previous episodes. I think it's actually been almost a year and a half since we had a discussion about this, but it's around smart defaults. And this is an area where Zach and I really believe that this is a specific area where broadband service providers can do a lot more now that AI is much more capable. Smart defaults have always been a thing. And when we talk about smart defaults, what we're talking about is pre-selected options that are designed to guide people toward a specific or clear outcome. And it's somewhat preventing them from choosing their own path, but in a way that's actually helpful. The whole reason for a smart default is you want to get people into an offer that's actually going to make sense for them. And I don't know how you feel about this. Well, I think I do know how you
This
feel about
this
this.
might be my hot take of the podcast. Can I go on a quick
Please
rant?
go for it. Yes, do your hot take. I love it when you do hot takes.
I'm trying to figure out like the nicest way to say this,
Mm,
but
just say it.
having
It's okay.
highlighting a tier, putting an outline around a tier, changing the color of your middle plan isn't a smart default. Now, we've talked about like how you can do that with consumer behavior and like, the psychology of driving people into that plan, but is it really a smart default? No, if anything, it's just a default. And I've got to say, like, it's 2026. That's so 2025. But no, like, let's be honest with ourselves here. There's so much more, you should be doing to make that smart default. Now, if you disagree with me, I'll ask the question, what makes highlighting your middle plan smart? And since no one's going to answer that, it becomes the default. But Gabe, I think that's my biggest kind of rant of the day here is when you're recommending a tier, or recommending a product or something, why are you recommending it? Like, why is it highlighted? What drove that decision? Is it highlighted for everyone? Why is your family plan recommended if I'm on your website? These are questions that we need to answer when it comes to the go-to-market strategy you're using and what you think a smart default is.
Hmm. And
Rant over.
and yeah, okay, perfect rant. I love it, and I think you're absolutely spot on. It's a massive opportunity that providers are missing out on. And there was a time pre AI where we did have to be a bit more generic about the smart defaults that
Back in
we were
back
putting
in
in
my
front.
day.
Yeah, exactly. Back in your prime. So, fair, right? Like there was a time where that made sense. We're way past that. And what Zach and I are going to talk about today is a couple of tools that we've built to frankly accelerate that significantly, and remove this need to just slap a most popular banner over the middle tier and hope people end up purchasing that. So, Zach, let's talk about the first one here, man. I'm really enthusiastic to talk about this address-based interface that you've been working on. Can you tell us a little bit more about what you're building, what you were looking to solve, and how this kind of falls into this smart default bucket?
Yeah, this tool, Gabe, I don't know if we should even, say how long we spent building these things. This one's less than an hour, so I just want to call that out of not so
I
much
think we
how
absolutely
easy.
need to call that out,
And
is
and
how rapid these
yeah,
things
and I'm
go.
not saying it's easy to do. I mean, it's relatively easy for I guess my expertise here. But the fact that I was able to take this idea, take this viable concept, and build it, I published it on GitHub. So if anyone listening would like to check it out, it's available. Reach out to me. But I took publicly available data in numerous countries at this point. I've tested this out with different use cases. The most recent one, though, I took property information, lot size, home size, property type, how many outbuildings do you have? What are those buildings made out of? These are all things that are actually very important to a broadband provider, especially when it comes to the broadband experience. Yes, you can sell a 1 gig or a multi-gig service to these houses, but if they have outbuildings or if they have, buildings made out of metal, what is the implication there? But anyway, this tool takes all this information and recommends a specific offering, not a specific tier, if you will, but it will say, hey, you could use outdoor Wi Fi. You can use a mesh. It understands what your property is and uses that data to right size you into an offering. And I think this really kind of flips what we've historically seen. Gabe, most recently, I made a hot take, and this is a hot take, everyone, but I said, I don't think I like to look at service tiers on websites. Like, can we get away from service tiers? How do we get rid of this? Right. Um, and this kind of just goes back to taking data, taking what we know about these households, recommending a plan, building it for them, and explaining to them why this is important. And that explaining comes from an AI integration. So using the Gemini API, that's what I use your API of choice, but using this AI model to ingest that data and then speak to the user, speak to the subscriber, speak to this prospect about why we're recommending that plan and then selling that to them. So before they even see the three other options I actually made, they have a plan built for them. Now, if they don't like it, they can go down and see those tiers that I just said I don't like, but they still have that choice. But I'm curating and I'm personalizing the offering for them. Gabe, this is something that large broadband providers are still not doing. Even these companies that have tons of data, tons of AI data as well, they haven't gotten down to this personalization at scale. So when it comes to buying broadband service, again, publicly available data, or in other cases, the data you have access to, leveraging that to curate that plan is very important. And now we have a tool that does just that.
hmm Well, and what I really liked about what you built there was it allowed people to, you were providing them information that you likely knew based on the data, but you were having them confirm it as well. And I think that's a huge part of pulling people through the process is once they've confirmed that, oh, yeah, I do have a 5 acre lot. And yes, I have a couple of outbuildings. Then they're already kind of pulled into that buying process because they're validating the things that you're saying. So it really helps pull people further down the funnel, I believe, as well, because they're confirming the things that you're sharing with them also.
I think the last thing I should put in there is you can bring in property value and
Mhm.
use that to your advantage too.
For sure. That's a great point. Yeah, there's lots of this data. And this is something I don't think every county, every city, every area of the US is going to have all of this information publicly available, or the world. So there's going to be some challenges in maybe particular areas, which maybe is a good transition to the next topic that we wanted to discuss here. But, to the extent that this data is available, it's, as you said, Zach, it was an hour worth of work. I think you and I were talking about this actually yesterday afternoon, and then you texted me in the evening and we're like, "Man, pretty much got this built."
It was legitimately, well, the thing was is like it took me half an hour to build, and then I was playing around with the AI capabilities a bit more, and totally an optional side quest here. But it was legitimately, Gabe. Like at 4:30 yesterday, we got off a call, had this idea, and by like 5:15, I was like, "Hey, do you have a minute to talk?" kind of thing.
hmm
And like, again, there's expertise where I know what I've built. I know how it works. I'm comfortable with like the security angle.
hmm
There's no API keys, out there, everyone. But it's just one of those things of we've seen this gap hundreds of times. Nobody's done anything about it, and now it's an open source project on GitHub, allegedly.
Allegedly. Well, let's talk about the next one here, and this sort of gets to a similar problem that Zach was talking about as well, which is the quiz. And this is something that I it's been a little bit of a pet peeve of mine for a while. I like the fact that we're getting first party data from customers to then offer them a personalized experience. However, the way that the quiz has traditionally been set up has been very rigid and often not aligned to the actual needs of the customer. The what's your least favorite question, Zach, in a online quiz about buying broadband service?
What's your email address?
Okay, besides gathering information about you, what about the use or those sorts of things?
I don't know, Gabe. I feel like I could make a list here. I the whole quiz thing is interesting because as a broadband provider, like the more information we can understand about our
Hmm.
subscribers' homes gives us a better opportunity to have that smart default we talked about or have that
Hmm.
offering. Um, Also that zero party data component too, but I don't know if
Sure.
there's anything that really bothers me too much.
There's one that drives me insane, and it's the number of devices. That's the one
Okay,
that drives me nuts.
that one I will put on the list because that could mean a lot. Gabe, I've got, I don't know, 30 Wi-Fi devices in my house. I'm using 2 of them right now. I'm using
Hmm.
my laptop and I'm watching TikTok as I talk to you on the podcast. But like I'm actively using one device. Like yeah, I genuinely hate that question because I don't think it's relevant in the modern broadband era.
I completely agree. It's totally irrelevant, and it's one that many providers are still asking. And so the project I was working on recently around this smarter quiz, I'll call it for lack of a better term, and I wouldn't call this full AI driven where, you're going in and, just having a discussion with the chatbot or something like this. But there's a rule based engine that can be deployed very easily. Again, this is something I did in probably 45 minutes, Zach, where I went on, I started, creating a tool, still a quiz, but I will call it a smart quiz where based on the answers that you give to a question, then the questions that you get asked subsequently are aligned to that question. I'll give you a really specific example. One of the things that always gets asked in quizzes, which makes sense, is how are you actually going to use the service? Are you somebody who games? Are you somebody who works remotely? Are you worried about protecting your family? Are you somebody who's just scrolling social media and, checking email? Like that's a very fair initial question. However, once I've answered that, I really want the next question to be tied to that question that I just answered. So in
Adapting
this
in real time.
Exactly. So in the smart quiz that I worked up, if you answer that you're a gamer, well, then it asks you a question about, well, what platforms do you use? Are you somebody who's an Xbox and PlayStation or a PC gamer? Are you somebody who streams on Twitch? Like those questions become one, tailored to the experience of the person who's gaming, but two, gives the provider a heck of a lot more information to understand, hey, if this is somebody who's like streaming on Twitch and on, gaming platforms all the time, this is somebody who's clearly a technology adopter, and I need to be speaking with them in a very different way. So within 2 questions there, I've got a whole lot of information about somebody. And again, if I didn't input the gaming one, if I said I work from home, well, what type of work from home do you do? Are you the person who's like Zach and I on, Teams and Zoom calls all day long? Or are you somebody who's just maybe checking email in the evening? Those are 2 very different use cases. So tying those questions and personalizing them through that entire process, I think is a really smart way to get people into the right smart default, and not being lazy about just well, how many devices do you have? Okay, I'm going to throw my 1 gig tier at you.
Can I have a third hot take? Am I allowed
Please.
3 in one episode?
Yes, absolutely. Do as many as you want.
Gabe, I looked at your website. I poked through the code. You used AI to build it, which is fantastic, of course. But the actual like functionality here doesn't use AI and it doesn't require AI. You'd
No.
kind of be a fool to pay an AI company to go out and build this because what we've done here is we've built this quiz, or you've built this quiz here. You have the decision tree logic in the back end that doesn't require AI to do. We know, what the user is inputting here. We've given them these options. We know how to curate that experience. If I say I'm a gamer and one of them I clicked that I was a console gamer, and
Hmm.
your console gamer is going to be different than a PC gamer, like a desktop gamer. But it was funny, Gabe, is I saw on that quiz too, is when I clicked that I was a PC gamer, there was also like a checkbox for Twitch. And I thought,
Hmm.
how awesome is that? Because if you're gaming on a PC, there's a lot of people who do stream on Twitch. So now I can add that in because the quiz knows that I'm a gamer and now I have this option. I wouldn't ask someone who's working from home, or I maybe wouldn't ask the family if they're a Twitch streamer. In your quiz, avoided that. It adapted in real time based off my answer. So I'm a big proponent of having this level of personalization. But behind the scenes, I
Yeah,
don't think
it's
you
not
need AI.
AI. I agree with you. It's not AI. It was a rule based engine, but I built the rules with AI in a logical structure and a logical way that made it very
Exactly.
easy and then at the end of it, I said, just give me the HTML code that I could go share with somebody. So I haven't got as far as Zach. I haven't uploaded it to a GitHub repository yet, but I mean, this is something that exists now that somebody could go out and, drop on their website today, frankly, and start to, get some feedback. The other piece at the end of it, obviously, was, well, now that you've gone through this process, let's check your address to see if there's availability. Can tie that back into one of those resources. Or if you're not ready to buy, then let's gather your email address so we can remarket to you later. The other piece that I didn't do on this one, but I've thought about in previous versions of the quiz, is input your email address to get a personalized offer. And you could fire an automated email off of that gives the customer a really I don't want to say really detailed, maybe that's not the right way, but like a very personalized email that talks to them about the benefits of what that service is going to deliver for them. So you're
And
giving them something straight away and gathering that zero party data to be able to
exactly.
remarket to them remarket to them in the future.
Exactly. I was waiting for you to say that. This kind of reminds me of a conversation Gabe. I think we texted about this. I was texting someone about this. I'm pretty sure it was you. But a few months ago, I was geeking out and I was like, I just connected my toothbrush to my MCP server or something like that. But as we talk about building with AI and thinking about what these use cases are and what data is available, I think people would be surprised on, what data is available, publicly via the internet, or what
Hmm.
data is available if we collect it ourselves. In your case, what I want to know is I want to know if someone gives me their email address, I want to know every answer they said on that quiz. I want to know everything about them because in return, I now have the ability to personalize every piece of marketing, every piece of that prospect or that subscriber's experience. Whereas right now, if I go to a provider's website, Gabe, you and I are both going to get the same exact experience, the same exact offerings. How many times do I talk about the direct mail I receive from
Hmm.
I received from one of these national providers? So, it's always the same. Then I talk to our customers; they receive the exact same piece of mail.
Hmm.
That's totally optional. That doesn't need to happen. So I think between your quiz, my address lookup tool, I'm very happy with where this has gone. Oh, and by the way, address lookup tools, like people do tend to pay a lot for those. Like you can go out and pay for those, but
Hmm.
all I did was parse out a KMZ file, have that JSON file, and if I want to put that in the cloud, you can do that too. But like I said, it's on GitHub. Check it out.
Well, and you and I have both played with these quiz tools a little bit. And what's interesting is that I think we've both come at it from kind of different angles, but both ended up with something that is frankly cool and useful. So it's fun to have these discussions with Zach because it's like he thought of it one way, I thought of it kind of a different way, but we both ended up with something that was, beneficial for providers. The next, I wanted to shift topics here, Zach, to one that you and we haven't figured out how to solve this one yet. So this one is a
give
bit of
us give
an
us a
open one.
weekend.
Yeah, exactly. We'll figure it out. But I did think this was a really interesting idea and not something that I've seen any provider tackle. So we were talking about how just a moment ago how we hate the question of, well, how many devices do you have? It's a lazy question in my mind. But what's interesting is that you could actually flip that to when the installation happens. When the installation happens and Wi-Fi appliance comes on, it should be scanning and identifying all of the devices that are connected in that home. What that could do is if you see a situation where there are 4 streaming TVs and 5 tablets and, 2 gaming systems or whatever it happens to be, you wouldn't necessarily want to make a upsell offer right then. I feel like that's maybe a little, I don't know. It's a bit of a bridge too far for me, but I do like the idea of, hey, if you're reaching out to that customer to have a conversation with them, maybe 2-3 weeks after you do the install, that may be a great opportunity to be like, hey, how are things going? And you could tell your CSR staff that, or provide the information to them. Hey, this is the person who has like 37 devices connected in their home and a whole bunch of, high value devices. Maybe a good opportunity to see if they'd be interested in upselling to something more. So it's not just about, hey, how do I use the data? It's also thinking about what is the right touch point with the customer at the right time. But I think that's a really interesting way to potentially use that data in a very, helpful, to drive a helpful outcome for the provider.
Yeah, Gabe, let's double click into that a little bit more. Um, Sorry for saying double click. I hate that phrase. I don't know where that came from.
We'll
But
circle back and double click on it.
let's dive into that. Let's pull up a deck. No, let's talk about that though. I think we've often talked on this podcast about having the right message at the wrong time. In this case, I think it's something we see quite often, more than we'd like to admit. But what is the implication here if you do get the timing wrong on the upsell? I mean, from a subscriber's perspective, how do you see that?
That's a good question. I mean, to me, it just undermines brand loyalty when
Yeah.
you're not thinking about the actual touch points across the entire customer journey. And it feels a little scammy at the very beginning of a relationship because you don't really know what the customer needs at that point. But after a few weeks, you probably have a pretty good idea, and it feels like maybe more of an appropriate time to do that. And the fact of the matter is, a lot of customers buy the wrong solution. Now, going back to the conversation, Zach, you and I were having 10 minutes ago, maybe we can do a better job of getting people
Well,
into the
that's what I
right
was going to say.
solution from the
Why did they
beginning.
buy the wrong solution?
Yeah,
And it's because
yeah.
you've got 6 tiers of data rate
Mhm.
units spread across your website that hasn't been updated in 10 years.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, when we're not doing a good job of clearly articulating the value of the different solutions, yes, people are going to just use price as the differentiator, and they're going to buy the wrong thing. So it's like I said, going back to what the problem is, it undermines brand loyalty. That to me is the big piece of it, and it just creates a struggle in the ongoing relationship with the customer.
So enough about micro SaaS apps. As we kind of round out the podcast here, I want to talk about um, search, SEO, and GEO. And again, we've talked about this in the past in episodes, but we continue to see these new AI tools, GPT, Perplexity, Gemini, Claude. All of these tools go out and research products and services, and kind of, I don't want to say they automatically make the purchasing decision, but they inform you how to make that purchasing decision. And I think we see this most with Gemini. I mean, let's be real. Like, you go to Google, you type something in, and I just had this conversation earlier with a customer, but I said, if you Google your, best internet in this town, what are you going to see? You're going to see this AI summary from Gemini at first,
Hmm.
or maybe you use Yahoo or Bing for some reason. But that Gemini search is really guiding people into how they should be making purchasing decisions. And the best way to combat that is to, of course, optimize not only your website, but your entire strategy. Make sure you have the content out there. Knowing these tools, go out and look at reviews and share other people's testimonials about your brand. You
Hmm.
have to be cognizant of that, be active on those channels as well. But Gabe, I know you built a tool to help people analyze this data a little bit as well across these different platforms. So I'd love to hear from you what this thing does, what that output looks like, and then how you can actually use that information as a BSP.
Yeah, this came up less than 2 weeks ago. I was on a conversation with some colleagues, and we were talking about SEO and GEO, and where as people move more to the tools that you're talking about, Zach. Well, how does a provider actually show up there? And it got me thinking that, well, we really should have a tool that helps us understand, based on the common questions that a potential subscriber or subscriber would be asking, how do these companies actually show up? And so what I built was a pretty simple tool that allows you to input some information about your company, your name, your website, a couple of areas that you might be serving. You may not, you could certainly do a handful if you wanted to. It's just going to be a bit more work with some of the prompting stuff here. But what it does is it takes all that information and it generates a set of prompts that you can then use in these AI search engines like Google AI Mode, like Perplexity that Zach was talking about. This is where it's like AI, but also a bit of manual work, right? So this isn't this isn't totally perfected yet. But once you've generated those prompts, you can take all those prompts, paste them into search engines like Google AI Mode, like Perplexity, like Bing. I know, Zach, it's a whole, nobody wants to admit that that's a thing, but it is the default on many Microsoft, platforms or PCs. So might as well get some information for that too. And then it will pull the results. You can take those results, paste it into this tool that I created, and hit generate report, and it generates a whole report for you around what the struggles are. What are you showing up well from a brand perspective? What are the inconsistencies across these different search engines? Are you, and there's simple questions like, who's the best Wi-Fi provider in this area? Or, if, who is a better provider, provider A or provider B? Just thinking about what those questions are that somebody would be asking. But I was pretty blown away by the results that came out of this. And again, it's a pretty simple tool. You can spend 20 to 30 minutes doing this work, and you get a really detailed, helpful report out of it that helps you understand what changes you need to make to start showing up better in these AI search engines.
I love using AI for shopping. It's probably one of my favorite like Gemini use cases.
Same.
Recently, going on vacation, was looking for some new clothes or things, and I went straight to Gemini and asked about like the climate or this time of year and things like. Most recently though, I also bought a new drone, Gabe. That's gonna be my weekend
Did you
project here.
really?
But
Oh my goodness, you didn't even tell me
so
this.
well, I don't know if I can legally say which kind of drone it was because I think it's technically banned in the US, but allegedly, rumor has it that I hypothetically may have or may not have bought a DJI Avata 360. So it's got a 360 camera on it. The
Nice.
alternative is from Insta360. I forget the name, anti gravity. So it also has a 360 camera on it. It's their first product. DJI, of course, is known in this space. But I was comparing them side by side because I thought at the end of the day, which one's best for me? Like, which
Mm.
one do I like? They do a lot of hiking, so I need something small that I can pack out. Very familiar with DJI. I've always bought from them, but we have this Challenger in the market. How does the camera quality compare? I'm hanging off a cliff in the mountains. Have you seen that video?
I've
You
seen
know
that
how
video. Don't ever show your mom that video. That was
how
terrifying.
how does the drone function in these anyway, these are all questions that I don't have the answers to. And going to Google, you can find a lot of people saying lots of different things here, but
Hmm.
having AI just go in, do a side by side comparison, and then respond to follow up questions. This is how people buy things. We're still a little bit, and Gabe, we've talked about this. We're close to Gemini just going out and just buying
Hmm.
that or taking what it knows about me and fully making those autonomous purchase decisions. Which Gabe, if that ever happens, give me your credit card number because I want to test it out on someone else's wallet. But over the last 18 months, we've talked a lot about AI, and I think we should do this, Gabe. I think we should go back and listen to the very first episode of AI we did back in would have been 2023, 2022. I can't
Gosh,
remember
it's
now.
gotta it's
We
gotta
should
feel so antiquated at this
we
point.
got to go back to that and see what's actually changed because today we talked all about how we've gone from using AI to co-managing life with AI. That's a joke. We've gone from using AI to building with AI and filling these gaps or finding these problems. And that's exactly what we've talked to broadband service providers. Instead of selling, 1 gigabit per second connection, what problem are you trying to solve in that subscriber's homes and how can we sell into that? Same thing with AI. Instead of going to AI and just doing simple prompting, how can we take that a step further, beyond the agentic AI platform, Gabe? But it's been a fun 18 months. I am very excited for the next 18 or the next however many, the next day until Anthropic releases something new.
Yeah,
But I think the
seriously.
big thing here with the podcast is every tool we talked about is buildable. Took us an hour, per tool maybe. The barrier is much lower than anyone thinks. Let's avoid the AI slop as best we can. Think about your ideas. Think about the impact and why that would fill a market gap. But like I said, I think the biggest thing here is knowing what to build. You have the tools to go out and do all of this, and if you have a problem you're trying to solve, let's talk. Let's keep that conversation going. Let's fill in that market gap. Have that micro SaaS app. This isn't about taking over Salesforce or anything like that. But I think there's a lot of room, especially in our industry, Gabe, for these unique tools. What we've built and what we've talked about on this podcast today is going to be more unique to our industry. But Gabe, you and I have talked about how do we take this outside the industry? What's the use case beyond this? And that's where I think my toothbrush MCP server comes into play.
That'll be perfect. Yeah, I just to wrap this up, Zach, to me, it's everything that we talked about today is something that you and I built in the last 2 weeks since we did a previous episode. That to me is the huge difference between everything that we were talking about 18 months ago and our ability to build and build rapidly today. It's so exciting to me to be able to come up with these ideas and then rapidly prototype them to see how it's actually is it going to fill that market gap, to your point. So, as Zach said, I mean, obviously you can tell that he and I are super nerdy and excited about this stuff. So like, reach out to us, have this conversation. We're more than happy to share, what we've been doing. I think there's a tremendous amount of opportunity here for providers to iterate on these things rapidly and start to really make some big differences in their business.
Absolutely. And thank you, everyone, for tuning in to Buffering today. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to follow us on your favorite podcast app and to share it with your friends and colleagues. And for more insights and updates, be sure to connect with Gabe and I on LinkedIn.